For this screencast, I'll be discussing how the game Portal adds to player immersion through different design and narrative techniques. First of all, let's discuss what immersion actually means. There's countless discussions and debates on what immersion is, but it can be broken down into 3 to 4 main types. According to Ernest Adams, founder of the International Games Developers Association, there's tactical immersion, which is experience when players perform operations that involve skill. This sort of immersion can be seen in shooting games where players will be in the moment and focused on trying to perfect their skills to succeed in the game. Next, there's strategic immersion, which is experience when players become so engrossed in planning moves for the future they're unaware of imperfections of the game in the present. Strategic immersion can be experienced in games like Civilization or even chess, where you have to think about your future moves. The final type of immersion that Adams mentions is narrative immersion, which happens when players become invested in the story of a game that they forget they're even playing a game. The reason why I previously said there are 3 to 4 main types of immersion is that many people also include spatial immersion. In their book, Patterns in Games Design, Staffan Björk and Jussi Holopainen define this as when a player feels they're actually in the game world and the game environment looks and feels real. There are countless discussions and differing opinions on what actually makes a game immersive, but for the sake of this screencast, we'll focus mainly on narrative and spatial immersion. Something that may hinder narrative immersion is the game's interface. In the book The Art of Games Design, Jesse Schell breaks down how players interact with the game world. When thinking about how players interact with the game world, we may assume it's as simple as player enters an input, the input is passed through the world, and an output is displayed to the player. However, in many games, there's a layer between your inputs and outputs called the virtual interface. When playing a game like Overwatch, the health bars and objective timers aren't part of the game world, but part of the interface. One of the things that makes Portal immersive is that the virtual layer is as non-existent as possible. You can see here that a massive difference between these two games is that Portal has no details like scores or amount of damage inflicted upon enemies, which brings the players closer to the game world. Since Portal can be categorized as a puzzle game, it's not surprising that hints are displayed throughout the game to help the player complete the task set before them. However, Portal feeds hints to the players in the form of environment design that fits in with the narrative of the game. You're in a scientific facility testing these portal guns, so it's understandable that you would be given advice on how you should use these guns. The hints don't hinder the player immersion, as they're part of the environment and not the game interface, unlike many mobile puzzle games in which you can simply press a hint button. In Portal, you're also given the current level you're on, but this information is incorporated into the game the same way as the hints. This is totally different to other puzzle games, such as Super Meat Boy, which show you your current level in a way that doesn't link to the game's story. Portal is extremely clever with its environment design, as most of the story is told through it. When playing the game, there are secret passages you can go through that hint to the true nature of GLaDOS. Theoretically, you can play the game without searching any of these rooms, but the secrecy of these rooms and the lack of clarity in the messages on the wall add a whole other dimension to the story. You can see the frantic scribbles on the wall curve around the pictures, which suggests a sense of urgency or even insanity. There's also the word help and a drawing of GLaDOS in red, which suggests malice. These rooms and the way they're designed make the player's imagination take control and help them become more invested in the narrative, which contributes to narrative immersion. Another way Portal feeds the player narrative without having to use the game's interface is through the use of dialogue. Characters tell you who you are and what you're doing, and this is how you end up learning the story, unlike other games such as This War of Mine, which occasionally uses the game's interface to tell you what has happened instead of dialogue. Another great example of Portal presenting story through dialogue is having old voice recordings play throughout Portal 2, which gives us the story without compromising immersion. Bendy and the Ink Machine also uses this exact technique, although not as well, since it doesn't make sense as to why there's random cassette players dotted around the floors. Although dialogue adds to player immersion in Portal, it's also something that can take away from player immersion too. You might be immersed in the story of a Telltale game, only to be acutely reminded that you're playing a game when dialogue boxes appear. And although games such as Oxenfree are trying to make dialogue more natural, even they can't get rid of dialogue boxes. Portal avoids this problem by simply having no option for dialogue at all. For example, in Portal 2, there could easily be boxes of dialogue options after Wheatley asks you a question, but there's no point. Portal have sacrificed this form of player interactivity for the sake of immersion. Portal's levels are made so that the player nearly always knows where to go, but in Portal 2, the environments become busier and it gets harder to figure out where you should go. However, because of this, we see some fascinating scenes with Wheatley. When escaping from GLaDOS, he guides you using light so you can go the right way and progress with the game. This is Portal trying to assist the player so that the game can progress, but in a way that's natural and doesn't make us remember we're playing a video game. If we had had the same scene, but instead added a map in the corner telling us where to go, we may be more aware that we're playing a video game. As mentioned previously, spatial immersion is considered a type of immersion, and although Portal may not have the most high-def realistic graphics, the game still has a photorealistic art style that specifically contributes to the spatial immersion. There's other puzzle games, such as Thomas Was Alone, that, like Portal, have a narrative immersion. However, since it falls into the abstract category of art style, it wouldn't be considered spatially immersive. In conclusion, Portal uses a mix of design techniques, such as lighting and environment design, as well as narrative techniques, such as dialogue, to create a game that is truly immersive and enjoyable.